a lot of people, when they hear like, hey, Susie down the street is kinky, I think people's imagination goes to like the most perverse, out of this world,
She's
like
in
something
all
is
leather
wrong.
with the,
Oh my God.
whip,
Yeah.
right?
She's whipping people, and she's
Yeah.
got like, men on all fours in her house. Like they just imagine like
Yes,
the
yeah.
weirdest stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but you could be only into like nipple play, like maybe you really like your nipples played with and clamped or whatever. That one small thing, you're a kinky person. Hello, everyone. This is Sex Positivity Unfiltered, where we talk about sex and we are not polite about it. My name is Lindsay Murray.
And I'm Denise Stratton.
And today we are talking about how to navigate kinks, whether you are in a monogamous relationship, maybe you have multiple sexual partners, whatever your situation is, we're going to talk about it. And this is a very fun, very big topic. I feel like we're going to kind of scratch the surface in an hour because there's a lot to talk about when it comes to kinks and like, what does that even mean? And what does that mean for whatever kind of relationship you're in? And we're also getting this out right in time for Valentine's Day. So hopefully this will help you kind of spice up your life if that's what you want to do. Denise, I know when you were researching this topic, you messaged me that you were having a lot of fun with it. I can't remember exactly what you said, but you were like, ooh, I'm having a lot of fun looking up this stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Because okay, so just for a disclaimer, the past couple episodes that you have made me research have been a little depressing on the
Yeah.
depressing side, and things that where it's more like violence based. And because it's violence based and I reflect on my own past behavior in my life, it depresses me because it's my bad behavior that I'm focusing on. But this, since it's kink and I'm exploring the kink, it's more liberating was the feeling I felt, because I would read other people's kinks, and in certain aspects of mental health, those traits are toxic and they're
Mm,
bad and they're misogynistic or they're patriarchal, or just all these bad connotations. But if it's in the kink community with two consenting adults who are very much willing and want to subscribe to that role play or whatever it is that they're subscribing to, then it's fine. So it was good. It was really good for me. Plus, I got to learn a lot about other kinks and things like that, and kind of gave me a way to explore my own kinks, which is great. So I'm excited to tell our viewers how that journey went for me. So.
okay, awesome. I'm excited to hear that too. I mean, for anyone who's listening who may be new to this podcast, Denise and I, we don't talk before our episodes. We come up with a topic, we kind of look up what we want to talk about, and we meet, and it's like new to both of us. So it's exciting. I'm almost like a listener too when I get to talk to you about this kind of stuff. And you know, you're absolutely right. Like we in the past episodes, we talked about violence and toxicity and like bad things that can happen in a relationship. But with kinks, when it's done right, it's really healthy. It's a healthy form of expression of sexuality. And we're going to talk about like how do you communicate about it? How do you set up the boundaries? How do you make sure that it is safe? Like one of the myths that I think a lot of people believe is that anything under the BDSM umbrella is dangerous. The reality is it can be if someone is like trying to take advantage of you, someone's crossing the boundaries. It can be unsafe, but when it's done well, it's not unsafe at all. It's actually very safe and can be very pleasurable. So, we'll get into it. I really kind of where I want to start real quick is sharing, I guess, like my definition or my understanding of what a kink is, also like versus what a fetish is. I think people use those words interchangeably. So I don't know if you looked up anything about like the difference between kink and a fetish, but a kink, really the simple definition is anything outside of what we would consider conventional sex. And that's different for different people, right? Like, are we talking about, bondage, or is having sex in the doggy position unconventional for you, right? Like, I know I'm laughing about that, but some people it might be, something new. I think for the purpose of this episode, we're really talking about things that are outside of like the norm, that it's not just intercourse or traditional like hetero sex. Like we're really talking about things that include um toys, objects, body parts that maybe aren't typically always sexual. Like we're kind of talking about all of that, I think.
Yeah,
Right? Would you agree? Okay.
yeah. When I was doing my research, the three questions I had the most before I even began was basically what are kinks, what are the common kinks, and basically how to find yours, how to explore. And when I was looking up, what are kinks, the biggest, exactly what you said, it's a broad term for basically consensual, non-traditional sexual intimate behaviors, right? So
Mhm.
yeah. And when it came to fetishes, I've always, like you said, I've always kind of interchanged those, but yeah, they're very different.
Yeah, the way I would describe it is like a fetish is a kink, but a kink is not always a fetish, because a kink is something that brings you pleasure, you enjoy it, you want to do it, like you're kinky in whatever way. A fetish is more so almost a requirement. Like, unless I have this thing present, I'm not going to experience peak pleasure, peak arousal. So, like, if someone has, I'll give you an example, and this is kind of like a personal story, but I've had someone reach out to me before and bought some of my shoes for sexual pleasure. Like they have like a shoe fetish, and they wanted shoes that were like worn, like smelled like feet, not new shoes. Like these are your shoes that you've worn for a long time, and they have like your scent on them. So I have sold someone my shoes before, and they get off to those
Oh.
shoes. For this person, it was a fetish, meaning unless I have like the right pair of shoes or the right scent of shoes, I don't experience pleasure. I don't experience sexual pleasure the same
So
unless like that thing is there.
So when you're describing fetish, and just the automatic feeling I get is it sounds very similar to like almost an addiction of some sort.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. And so, and again, like nothing wrong with the fetish. Like you could have like, I met someone that has like a glove fetish. Like when there's gloves involved in their partner, sexual partners wearing gloves, that is like peak, like that's peak arousal for them, and they don't experience that if there's no gloves involved, right? Whereas a kink is like, I enjoy bondage, I get a lot out of it, I'm willing to do it, I have fun when I do it, but I can still experience peak pleasure and arousal and orgasm, like even if that's not there, right? Because
Okay.
there's like multiple things that can get me there. So that's kind of like how I tell the difference.
That makes sense, basically. So kink is pretty much an umbrella term that covers, everything that's outside of two monogamous, heterosexual monogamous partners engaging in sex, right? So
Yeah.
that's pretty much a big umbrella term. Which, fun fact, I found out that the reason it's called kink is the term derives from the idea of a bend, right?
Ah,
So
okay.
think of a bend in one's sexual behavior, right? Which
Yeah.
is contrasted with the behavior of considered straight, right? So straight or vanilla. So yeah,
Yeah.
kink makes sense. You're bending the normal. So I like that. But yeah, so basically, summarizing what you're saying, kink is the big umbrella term for anything that's just not the traditional what we see in the media. And then fetish is almost like a subset of that, where the people who have a fetish, unless they have that thing, sex is just it doesn't go anywhere for them whatsoever. Like they have to have this specific like almost a relationship. They have a relationship with whatever their fetish is, and it's a
Yeah.
requirement, like you said, requirement.
It's like a requirement. That's exactly it. Yeah. So I always like to kind of give that difference, because I do think people use it interchangeably, which I get why they do. It's people just kind of lump them together, but there is that difference, which is important to note. So I'm curious what, I mean, you can jump in with wherever you want to start, but
Oh man. Okay.
I want to hear from you first.
So I'm gonna mention the sources that I used up front, just for our audience to know where I got this stuff from. YouTube was actually my big go-to for the research this time. I discovered a YouTuber called Kinky Sam Jones. that has a spreadsheet that I will mention later. I also did the Cut channel, which I'm sure you've seen the channel Cut, but they're amazing. They had a dominatrix basically guess, a bunch of strangers' kinks, just by
Oh,
asking them questions.
cool.
Yeah.
Is
And
I'm just curious, the spreadsheet you mentioned, is it like a yes, no, maybe kind of list or no?
almost, but no, more number rated.
Ah,
But yeah,
okay.
I'll definitely mention her when we're going through the exploration. And then of
Cool,
course
cool.
I also I used Wikipedia, as I always use. Please donate to them. They support this podcast in ways you don't know. And then and then just for a personal touch, I'm a part of a lesbian group. I also know that lesbians or just same-sex relationships kind of derived from the kink community. So
Mhm.
I definitely reached out to them and got their input on how they explore their kinks as well. So a bunch of different sources that I try to get from this.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that you're mentioning the lesbian group because I think there's like some data behind this. This is of course not for everybody, but in general, queer people are more open to kinks and explorations. I think it's because their relationship in and of itself is already out of the norm. And so it's kind of like we're already like in that territory of like having to be more open. I'm not saying that that's right, that like a lesbian relationship like should be out of the norm, but it is, right?
Yeah.
Compared to straight couples. So just like just to kind of like give that example or give a little bit of I don't know, fact to that, there is something to that they're more open to exploring and figuring out what they like as opposed to straight couples, especially because a lot of straight couples, especially like where we're from, there's going back to like the religious aspect. Like if you have like a Christian straight couple, um the likelihood of them, wanting to explore kinks is maybe not super high.
Yeah, no, it's scary because I mean,
Hmm.
you want to kind of be vanilla if you're traditional, right? If you're a traditional straight
Yeah.
couple who've always grown up with, kind of a sex negative connotation. But yeah, I've known for a fact that, the LGBT community is part of the kink community. I've always
Mhm.
seen it more as like the kink community is kind of part of our community. However, inherently with the definition of kink, the fact that it's just anything that's consensual, that's non-traditional, that's outside of monogamous straight heterosexual two partners engaging in sex, I mean, inherently it puts LGBTQ in kink community just already.
Right.
So I guess I am in the kink community by default, even if I didn't have any kinks, which I do, and we'll discuss that. All right. So
All right. Awesome.
but with that research, I also I found so many kinks that I didn't know were kinks. Bonus points in the comments if you can count how many times we said kinks in this episode.
Take a shot every
Take a
time we
shot.
said it. You'll be passed out by the end of this episode.
But yeah, so the most common kinks I definitely wanted to cover because being part of the kink community without realizing that I am, it made me feel I guess more open and I guess accepted and into a community, right?
Mhm.
And a lot of these things that I'm about to list off, I've never really seen as kinks, but I guess I could. So the first one I have is pretty much gender bending. So think drag queens, or think anytime
Mhm.
that I don't know, role play and you decide to play a different gender than yours. So that could be a kink as well. The homoeroticism is the term for queer sex, which, by the way, I found out that and I don't know if this is your experience, Lindsay, a lot of straight people have homoerotic fantasies.
Yeah.
But I mean, and that does, just for a disclaimer for everyone at home, that does not mean you are gay, that does not mean you are part of the queer community. But apparently it's a very common kink, which I thought
Yeah.
was interesting.
Very common.
Okay.
So common, more than you would even think. And I think people are embarrassed to admit that. So if I hear, let's say someone who identifies as straight, they admit that, it is not a surprise to me at all. I'm like, "Oh yeah. That makes sense," So I mean, it's good to normalize that.
Yeah, no, I loved it. I was like, wow, because to me, sexuality in general is a spectrum, right? And just because there's an argument even in the lesbian community that if you're a lesbian and you sleep with a man, you're no longer lesbian. That's not true. And this pretty
Yeah.
much makes true the opposite. You can easily fantasize about a member of the same sex and still be straight. And I do very
Mm.
much believe that. And then the other two that were a little that I didn't consider as kinks, but are kinks are tantric sex.
Mm.
Which was I've heard of that term, but I've never really dived deep in it. But I guess it's a very sensual energy type of well, not even intercourse, but behavior. And then the other one that I feel like everyone does. So if you've done this, you have engaged in kink, just so you're aware, but sex outside of the bedroom.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's out of the norm, right? It's like
Yeah,
out of, because like the norm is in your bedroom, probably at night with your straight partner, there's intercourse. Like, yeah, it's not, it's, you know, I mean, it definitely is a kink. I never thought of it that way
me
until you said it in
neither.
this moment. But yeah, interesting.
Yeah, so if you've engaged in any sex outside of your bedroom, then yeah, I mean, technically you've engaged in kinky behavior, which is, I feel like, a mild version, but still, hey, that you foot in the door, right? And then of course you have your more extreme kinks that I'm gonna go through, and I am not here to yuck anybody's yum whatsoever, but these opened my eyes, and some of them I will say bring out somewhat of an uncomfortable feeling in me, but that's just because I'm ignorant and I don't know the rules or the play or anything. All right, yeah. So jump us back up. So the more extreme kinks. So this is gonna go more into the kink versus BDSM route, right? So BDSM, for anyone who doesn't know, it is 4 letters. However, it stands for bondage, discipline, domination, submission, sadism, and masochism. So there's 6 words but 4 letters for the acronym. So basically it involves a power exchange of some kind. Now kink, just since it's just non-traditional sex, it doesn't have to involve a power exchange, but BDSM does.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of, I guess, more aspects that not all of these that I'm gonna list go into the BDSM realm, but they're pretty close to it, right? So that's gonna be role play. And this could be, role play is an umbrella term. It could go down to more specific. So when I think of role play, other than just, you dressing up as, I don't know, a maid and the master or whatever, is master sub play. So I'm thinking dominatrix and things like that. Also, I learned about pet play, which
Mm.
I have engaged in without knowing that I was engaging
Interesting.
in a, yeah, I guess I can go on this little tangent. One time I think this was like our 3rd date, but on a 3rd date, this woman brought me basically she said we were going to go to a fetish ball, which I was, fine with. I was excited for. I've never been to one. And then right before we go in, she pulls out a leash and she asks me if I don't mind, if I would feel comfortable, walking in and keeping her on the leash the whole time. And then she broke down the rules of leashes, and if I see anyone on a leash, and basically you have to ask permission if you want to speak to one. And she told me not to feel uncomfortable if someone else asked for permission for someone to speak to her, things like that. So there was a whole set of rules and behaviors that we had to follow by in this ball, which I found very
Yeah.
interesting. But yes, I've engaged in pet play. So think, yeah, collar leash, things like that. There's also, which is more, this next one is more inherent in the gay man community, the male community, is puppy play.
Yep.
I
Yep.
I was told that there are female puppies, but it's mostly gay men, which, funny enough, before we a week ago, while you were in Antarctica, I met a pack of puppies while I was at my lesbian poker game, at a lesbian bar.
Oh,
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, a whole pack came in. They were they had their masks. I didn't even clock it at first because they didn't have any masks on. They had their masks chained to their hip, right? So it basically had that full puppy mask on. And then I met the alpha and I picked his brain a little bit on the alpha. Yeah, it was very, it was very eye-opening, and I thought it was really cool looking too, just from an outsider perspective, because they all looked up to him. He was it was very much like a dom sub kind of
Yeah, there's still like a power dynamic, right? At play with that.
yeah, and he was telling them good boy when they were doing good behaviors, or he was correcting them. It was just it put me just out. It was very out of the norm, and I loved it. Like, everyone was consenting, everyone was happy about it. He had two puppies that were free range puppies, which means they don't belong to a pack, but they were trying to work their way into the pack. It was really cool. I also know that there's more like the curious sensations type of kink BDSM. So when I say that, I'm thinking about like breath play. So a lot of people like to be choked during intercourse.
Mm-hmm.
Also impact play. That's where the spankings and the floggers, those come in, the whips. There's also
Which by the way, real quick, I'll say about breath play. Anyone who's like interested in trying that, be really careful with breath play, because if you don't know what you're doing, it can cause a lot of harm. There is actually, I don't think Dallas is really so great about this, but like if you look at like the LA area, for example, they have classes where they'll teach you how to do things like breath play or like knife play, or like things that could be that maybe like you're interested in but don't really know how to do safely. They literally will have classes you can go to that will teach you. And so again, like our area where we're at, I don't think there's a ton of options. Maybe that's something we need to look into. But just like as a disclaimer, right? Like some of the stuff you're listing is totally fine, but definitely get the knowledge of how to do it right before you try it, I think is really important.
Oh yeah, yeah. I actually have a whole slide on just like caution tips, and I have a breath play
Oh,
slide.
cool.
Since we're going into it, I'll go over those real quick. Like you said, breath play is can be dangerous, but if you know how
Mhm.
to do it correctly, then it's not. So basically, the easiest way to keep it safe is if you just do your hand over the mouth is the safest choke, because
Mm,
there's no way it could be fatal, right? If you just
yeah.
do the hand over your mouth, because I mean, as long as you're not tied up of any sort, that's an easy choke to get out of. And then just breath play is not for you if you do have a heart condition of some sort, because it is risky to put pressure on the windpipe. Like that's a risky thing to do. And then they also say to never ever do breath play by yourself. Always have a partner. So those are
Yeah.
some tips that I learned while I was researching. I'm telling you, Lindsay, I really enjoy this topics.
I love it. I love it. Those are good tips. Very, very true.
But yeah, breath play. So these are more sensations: breath play, impact play. There's also electric play, which is basically the electricity devices that you feel like the current going through your skin into certain
Hmm.
sensations. I also found out that there is a kink of being licked,
Mm.
which licking has always just been my lesbian. It's just a normal part of my sex life. So I didn't realize that would be considered a kink. But yeah, apparently, I was watching an interview with one guy who just for his birthday, his partners just slathered him in food and then licked him, and that's his kink. And then obviously we have the ones that are seen in the media a lot, which would be feet fetish, right? So feet fetish is
Hmm.
very common. So is spitting. We see spitting all in porn everywhere, saliva play. And then the not so common kinks. Boy, I learned a lot, Lindsay.
Real quick, I don't know if I've ever mentioned this to you before, but when I was getting my sex therapy certification, you have to attend something called a SAR, which stands for Sexual Attitude Reassessment. And basically, the whole point of a SAR is to check your biases and to even like uncover biases that you might have about other people's sexuality. And so that the weekend of the SAR, it's like a group of people all trying to become sex therapists or sex educators or sex counselors, like all the above, right? Like working towards your certification. And so there's a lot of discussion, but there's also a lot of porn, essentially. And so you see videos and images of people engaging in sexual acts that maybe you've engaged in yourself, maybe you haven't. And the whole point is to like challenge, like, hey, you're going to be seeing clients or people at your business that are engaging in these kind of sexual acts, like what comes up for you when you see it or when you think about it or when you have to talk about it. And there were some things that we saw that genuinely disturbed me. Like, I'm going to be honest, I know it sounds judgmental, but there were some things I saw that really disturbed me that I would have like never thought about. But like the visceral reaction was like, whoa, like I gotta like evaluate this, right? Like, why is this bothering me so much? And what am I gonna do if I have if I have like a client who does like these things? Like, how am I gonna handle that? So there's like a lot of discussion around that. But one that genuinely bothered me, and it still does. And if anyone were to come to me that likes this kind of play, I would never judge you. It's just like the imagery of it got to me, and that was blood play. So
Yes.
some people do enjoy blood play. And I remember like I almost felt faint watching it. And so it's definitely not for me, but I also had to do a lot of like mental work around why would someone enjoy that and like can that be okay? And it is okay. And I can work with someone who enjoys that. But like having to see it, I feel like I just went white as a ghost. Like I was just like, oh my God, I did not like watching that at all. Right. So
I've
that's probably on your list.
oh no, it's number 3 on my list. Like,
Yeah.
did not know. I have a friend that a couple years ago explained to me that they like knife play, right? So that's what I immediately thought. But going into the research, no, blood play is very much like the use of of blood, which I can't even imagine what a porn would look like, girl. So I would probably be faint as well. I can't
I
see blood
was
like
because
that.
it was like the video we watched, there was like some device that this man was using. I want to say it was like on his testicles and blood was just like shooting out. Like that was the video. And I was like, oh my God, this is the thing that I it was so hard for me to understand. I felt really sick watching it. A lot of other stuff, even if it was like out of anything I've ever done, I was like, I can watch this. But that was the one that is always going to stick with me that, I had such difficulty with. So yeah, it's definitely you're right. It's like the
Yeah,
use of it. Like there's a lot of it.
and it's more on the extreme. Like when people are afraid
Mm-hmm.
of BDSM or they're afraid of the kink, they usually think of these more extreme kinks that aren't very common but are apparent in the community, and
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with it, as again like I said, as long as there's consent on both parties. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, blood play is definitely up there. The other ones I have on my list are autofellatio, which I mean, kind of kudos in a way that you're that flexible. Obviously that can only be done, I'm assuming, with men. And
Yeah.
then the one that I don't know if you know about, I learned about it recently, was ovipositors. Do you know what those are?
I don't think so.
Okay. So it's basically a device. Looks like a dildo, but it makes these like gelatinous eggs, and you stick it inside of you, and it lays those gelatinous eggs in you. So ovipositors. So it's like almost like a breeding type thing. It felt very reptilian to me whenever it was explained. But yeah, apparently that is a kink as well that I've never heard of in my life. And then there's
I've
also
never heard of that one
girl,
either.
girl,
Interesting.
very interesting. I even brought it up to Sam. I was like, "Do you even know what this is?" It was interesting. Um, yeah, yeah. But again, not yucking anyone's young. So yeah, so there's blood play, there's knife play, there's also lunars, which are like balloon kinks, kinks
Hmm.
around balloon, and then there's which I found very dangerous, and I don't know if I wanted to even claim it as a kink, because to me this is ruining people's relationships. But apparently being a homewrecker is also a kink, which I didn't like at all. But
I can understand totally why it's listed as a kink because some people, whether you agree with it or not, they do get their rocks off to being a homewrecker and to being in that kind of dynamic. It doesn't make it right though, because that would be to me like, when we talk about open relationships, like ethical non-monogamy,
yeah,
that is unethical non-monogamy. So the unethical piece is it's never going to make it right to me, but I understand why it's a kink, because some people, that's what they enjoy the most. Now, if that's like that's what you enjoy the most, I would definitely go and see someone to unpack that, because like the main way that you enjoy sex shouldn't be in an unethical way. Does that make sense? Like,
No,
I think,
agreed. Just from my logical mind, just from, we're taking the definition of kink, right? Which, yeah, it's a broad term, but the main thing I took away from kink is it's consensual. It's
yeah.
consensual. Yeah, it's non-traditional, but it's consensual. So to me, if you're a homewrecker, yeah, you and that one partner that you're homewrecking with might have consent, but there's one also person that isn't giving consent for this kink. So I don't know. It just
They do. I know I just said like unethical, but it is also called non-consensual and non-monogamy.
yeah,
That's
see?
the term.
So I don't
That's actually the
know.
term. You'll hear like CNN, which is consensual non-monogamy, and then NCNN is the non-consensual non-monogamy. So yeah, it's kind of like an oxymoron, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
is it pink or is it not? Interesting.
So I don't know, a home wrecker, which again I can see the reason why you would, because cheating can be fun. This is from someone who used to, when especially in my high school young adult years, used to be a cheater, and I used to feel that excitement and mystery that you used to get whenever you were going
Mm-hmm.
behind your partner's back. It's not right, and to be honest, from someone who did it for a long time, it'll give you way more stress than you really need.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, I don't know. Just I get the appeal, but I wouldn't consider it a kink because it's not consensual. But anyway, so did you have anything that you wanted to bring up before we go into exploration?
Yeah, I kind of want to talk about communication really
Mm.
quickly, like how to even communicate this, whether it's with, like, let's say you are in a monogamous committed relationship and you're going to your partner and you want to talk about it, or even if it's with like a new sexual partner, like maybe this is not a committed relationship, it's someone that you're having sex with or you want to have sex with, or, right, like it's getting there. This kind of communication can go either way. I guess I'll kind of start with more of like like in my mind, what I'm thinking of is like two partners who are together and maybe they've never explored kinks before and one partner now wants to. Like maybe it's something new to them, right? So the way to communicate about it, honestly, is to be clear and direct and understanding and prepared for it not to happen right away. If you want to try something new, but you're kind of afraid to say it, you can start off that way by just saying, like, I'm really scared to tell you this. I'm nervous. I don't know how you're going to react, but I want to be honest. Like, I want to try, we'll just use bondage as an example, right? Like, I want to try bondage in our sexual relationship. Um, Whenever you bring it up, you want to bring it up from a place of like curiosity and exploration and honestly kind of like fun and playfulness too, as opposed to, hey, our sex life is boring, so we need to spice it up. If you started off on that note, your partner is less likely to be open because they're going to take it as like, well, you're saying I'm boring unless I
Oh,
do this thing, right?
no, that makes
So
sense. Yeah.
yeah, you want to be really like careful because unfortunately with couples I've worked with, I've seen those conversations really go south. And sometimes it's because it starts off with like, well, our sex life is boring and we never have sex. So we need to start doing this thing. Well, if you start off on that note, it's probably not going to go well. Versus like, I've been interested in this thing. Maybe I have this fantasy. Can we talk about that and just talk about it, right? Like I just want to talk about it. And you definitely want to do it at a time when you're not already currently being intimate. Like you really don't want to say it in the middle of sex if it's like something new, right? If it's like we've never done bondage before, we're in the middle of sex, and then my husband is like, "Hey, let me tie you up."
Surprise.
Yeah. Hold the fucking phone. I was not ready for that, right? Like if it's something you wait until you're just chilling on the couch or whatever, right? Like nothing's really going on. If you're the one like initiating the conversation, be prepared that the reaction may not be great. Because I think kinks are very shameful and taboo and too extreme for a lot of people. And so when it's new to them, let's say you get a bad reaction from your partner and it feels kind of like judgmental and shameful. I'm not saying that that's okay. Like, I'm not saying you should accept being shamed for something you're interested in. But if you initially don't get a good reaction, just kind of like prepare yourself for that, because you can come back and revisit like, hey, this isn't a shameful thing.
Have you had a client before who tried to have that conversation with, their partner and it didn't go well?
Yeah, plenty of times. And it
Really?
sucks. Yeah, and it sucks when it happens, right? Because
Yeah.
like they might be into something and their partner will very much have this reaction of like, you're a freak. And it's like, ooh, well, that is really hurtful. And your partner is probably going to not want to talk about that thing anymore because you made them feel really bad about themselves. And then now you have this dynamic where like, now we're not talking about anything because you let it be known that you view me as a freak now.
Yeah, no,
You
I
know?
mean that when you said that, that immediately brought me back to pretty much like your coming out story and how obviously with some loved ones they're gonna shame you for it and make you feel weird for having these thoughts and these feelings that are can be very much normal. So yeah, it's anytime shame is introduced, that's scary.
It's scary. And it could be like you're a freak. It could be like, what's wrong with you? It could even be, I've even had partners be like, you must be a sex addict if you like this thing. And I'm like, oh my God, how are we getting from a conversation to now they're addicted to sex? They're just trying to introduce something new that they fantasize about or might be interested in or want to explore with you. They're not asking you to like do it right this second. Right? So anytime you're coming, if you react from a place of like judgment and shame, now there is no room for exploration because your partner doesn't feel comfortable, right? Because you just made them feel bad. So like if you're on the receiving end of this conversation, if you feel yourself getting judgmental, I just ask you to like take a breath and slow down. And it's okay to admit, hey, this is really new and intimidating to me. I don't know if I quite understand, right? Like why you would want to do this. So then you kind of move into, right, the curiosity and understanding phase. It's all about being curious. Honestly, like curiosity is the opposite of judgment. Don't
Hmm.
judge, just be curious. If my partner comes to me and says, I've really been fantasizing about like rope play and bondage, versus me going like, well, you're a freak. Don't say that. Start asking them questions. Hey, I've never done bondage before. We've never done that before. Have you ever done that before? And also, like, why do you like that thing? Like, you can get, if you're asking good questions, you can get really deep. Why do you think you fantasize about that? What sensation do you think that you're going to get from rope play that would be arousing to you? How do you expect the experience to go? Do you want me to tie you up or do you want to tie me up or do you want to do both? Like you can ask so many good questions.
Okay.
And again, it's not a guarantee that I'm ready to try it right now. Right. That's what I think people need to remember. Like, if you're open to the conversation, it's not an agreement. It's not me saying, yeah, let's in 20 minutes, let's go and try it out. Like, no, it's not that. It's just me letting my partner know I genuinely want to know why you're bringing this up and what you like about it and what you would get from it and how do you think it would go. Then from there is when you can kind of decide, do I want to try this? And what kind of measures do we want to have in place? And agreeing that it's okay to stop, because that's part of exploration too. Like I think people think when you agree to explore, it's going to go amazingly. Well, exploration it doesn't mean it's going to go amazing. Part of exploration is finding out what you don't like too. If we explore, I could decide, hey, I really didn't like that at all.
Okay.
I didn't like that at all. And these are the reasons why. You don't want to end it there. You're like, hey, I hated it. We're done. No, it's like, I just didn't enjoy it. Well, why not? Because it made me uncomfortable. What specifically made you uncomfortable?
Okay.
Right? Like, was it this, or that? You can get really deep into it. And then kind of from there, it doesn't have to be a hard no. It just means, okay, maybe that wasn't quite for both of us. Let's kind of like lower it or intensify it. Or maybe I didn't enjoy it, but I'd be willing to do it for you every now and then. Right. And Dan Savage has this, I hope I'm getting the ratio right, but he kind of has this ratio for like couples where one partner is kinky, but the other one's not. For every time you engage in kink, you engage in like vanilla sex 3 times. It's like a 3-to-1 ratio. Because
Oh,
kink is kind of intense for someone who isn't kinky. If you
okay.
do it once, the next 3 times are more vanilla. And then you kind of go back and do kink again. And right. So you kind of have
Kind of a compromise almost, like of
it's a
a
compromise. Yeah, it's a
yeah.
really good ratio to have and can work for a lot of people. So overall, my key to communicating about it is to be really clear and direct. Like, don't downplay what you like because you just want to be honest, and then just meet it with curiosity and get really deep with it. Ask really good questions. It doesn't need to end at like, I like this thing. Okay. And then we just don't talk about it anymore, which I think a lot of people do. I think a lot of people get intimidated by the conversation and they never like
Oh
revisit
yeah.
it.
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure. I mean, I've gone through some shaming in general, just as far as my, because I like to keep it fun in the bedroom as well. So
Mm-hmm.
vanilla sex is great, but every once in a while, I do like to explore outside of the bedroom, or I do like to,
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'll say it for the internet, but I do enjoy things like bondage and things like
Yeah.
that. So when you first the first sexual encounters are pretty vanilla whenever I was single, my single life, but after a couple encounters I was always very afraid to bring up, hey, do you want to be tied up, type thing,
Mm-hmm.
because that's very scary, and
Yeah.
I don't want anyone to shame me for it, because shaming from a queer woman, shaming you for your sexuality is one of, like, it literally triggers me just even thinking about it. Like the
Of
hairs on the back of
course.
my neck stand up. It's pretty bad. So yeah, so I could see that. So the just this might be beating a dead horse, but the three kinks that I see very common at, as far as like heterosexual culture, or just in the media, is basically sex in public of some sort, um, anal sex, and then sex with multiple partners. Like it seems like those are the three that a lot of heterosexual couples will engage in. But if you have someone who's not kinky and is not comfortable with those, your advice is basically to explore it lightly, like little by little, and kind of
Mm-hmm.
get a feel of why your partner wants these things. I guess the situation that keeps coming up to my mind is the threesome one, right? Because I see that with guys a lot and women, right? Where the guy wants a threesome of some sort, and the woman thinks of it in a judging, like, well, am I just not good enough, right?
Yeah.
Is what I see a lot. So you're pretty much giving the advice of the partner to explore why they want another partner there, or I mean, how would, in that scenario, or even in the anal sex, how would you start light, I guess?
I mean, honestly, it goes back to communication again and
Okay.
going really slow. Like if someone wants a threesome and the other partner begins feeling insecure, like maybe I'm not good enough, is that why he wants to be with someone else? Take all the time you need
Okay.
to dissect that. I mean, there's ways to really process, like, is this an insecurity that really is within me that I can resolve on my own? Or is this insecurity telling me I just don't want to do a threesome? I don't want to agree to that. And I'm sorry, right? Like it's just not something I want to do.
Yeah, like
And
monogamy
then
is very much in people's
yeah,
belief
because
systems.
exactly. Because that's the thing is like when you enter into a relationship and you are monogamous, and then one partner eventually wants to open up, let's say have a threesome, it can feel like a broken agree. Not that they broke the agreement, but it can feel like the potential of breaking the agreement that you had. And that's very threatening to a lot of people, right? And
Yeah.
some people decide I am just never going to be okay with that, and that's just my truth, and that's totally fine. Other people might go, you know what? I really want to like be more open, so maybe I need to process, why am I feeling insecure? Am I afraid that he's going to like this other woman more? Am I afraid that like this is going to be the start of a bunch of other stuff that I'm going to have to agree? Like there's so many reasons why you could feel jealous and be right insecure,
So
and you have to really
how would you
yeah.
ease into that? Like, would you begin with, I don't know, introducing porn while y'all are having sex, or like how would you, I guess
Yeah.
the other one is anal. How do you ease into anal? Like to me it's just the black and white. This is what we're
Yeah.
doing.
Well, when you ease into anal, you don't really start with like penis in anus sex. Like you really don't start there. You would start with like a finger, or like
Ah,
maybe like a small toy, like a
okay.
butt plug, or you would start really small and you would start with a lot of lube and you would stay there for a while. Like it's not like you finger one time and like we're good to go. It can be a really slow progression to lead up to like actual like person to person like intercourse. And even then, even when it's okay, I'm ready. Like I'm ready to try like quote unquote actual anal sex. Even then it's really slow. Like you may not go all the way in the first time. You may
Interesting.
only put the tip in because maybe that's all the person can really handle, right?
Okay.
And use a lot of lubrication. And you just really respect that, right? Like with that, there's no way to know like how fast this is going to progress or when am I going to be ready for more. There's no way to really know. You're just kind of like you're starting small and then you're checking in. You're going
Mm.
small and then you're checking in. Hey, is this okay? Is that right?
Kind of like
So
the upshift, downshift you were telling me.
yeah.
Like, okay. So I think
Mhm.
that's really good advice.
There's just a couple more things I want to go over real quick. Have you ever heard of a munch? Munch.
Yes, I have
Yeah.
heard of a munch thanks to a mutual friend of ours. Yes.
Yeah, so for anyone listening who doesn't know what a munch is, it is a social gathering for kinky people. So anyone who's into kink, anyone that is into alternative relationship styles, into BDSM, like whatever, it is a social event. And when I say social event, I don't mean like we all meet at TGI Fridays dressed in our dominatrix stuff, right? Like you go and you're literally meeting as friends and you're not there to out anyone. Because some people who go to a munch they might not be out, right? To
Mm.
their friends and family, and maybe really no one knows that they're kinky. So when you go to a social gathering, it does look like a normal gathering of friends, but you know you all have a common interest. Like, hey, we're all kinky people, we're all here to hang out. And so you're kind of there to hang out. You might not even talk about kinky stuff when you're there because you're meeting at a bar, you're meeting at a restaurant, like whatever.
Public setting,
So
yeah.
public setting, yeah. So I always like to mention a munch because when someone is like, "Hey, I feel alone in being a kinky person," if you find a munch in your area, it's a really good way to make friends that are are pretty much guaranteed not to judge you. Like y'all have similar interests, you're kind of in the same community, so it's comfortable to make friends that way. Um, Second thing I was going to mention real quick, a kink being like having sex in public that is another like oxymoron to me as far as like is it consensual or not like let's say you like having sex in a car well someone could walk by your car and they could see you and your partner naked in the car they did not consent to seeing you that way but here you are in public like doing that
And it's
so
illegal. Yep.
and it's illegal and I think it should be illegal like I kind of agree with that so sex in public is very like it's risque I get the appeal but if someone were to see you they did not consent to watching you have sex and so to me that's like a violation right of someone else so that's one of those where I'm like oh it's a kink but I don't know how consensual it is for like anyone who could walk by.
Yeah, no, I agree. Don't do it in public. I will say, and if you've never tried it though, I've had sex outside in the mountains in Colorado before. And
Mhm.
for anyone who's willing to explore outside, there is nothing more freeing than being naked in the mountains with the grass around you, with the stars, just out in the wilderness. It was great. Obviously, we were away from everybody, so there was no way that anyone was going to come walk in on
Yeah.
us. But
Yeah.
yeah, if you do want to explore, there are ways to safely explore that's not
Yeah.
illegal.
Yeah. Yeah. That would no, that's a good example because no one else is around.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
to me that makes perfect sense. But people that are like in an alleyway or something where I'm like, gosh,
Yeah.
people walk by here all the time. Like you gotta be really careful.
Or as a bartender, those of you who like to have sex in public restrooms, stop it.
Yeah.
PSA.
Yeah. Exactly. So exactly. And then the last thing I wanted to mention real quick, kind of a myth that I want to debunk about kinks and people who are kinky. I know if someone is into like a certain kink or whatever, right? Like whatever it may be. Um, I know a lot, you probably heard this before, but a lot of people will assume that it's like rooted in some form of trauma. Like something must have happened to them and that's why they like this thing. They're like reclaiming whatever. Now, someone who has been sexually traumatized might end up having a kink and that's fine, right? But there's no correlation between the two. Like if you do like something, it does not mean that it's rooted in trauma. So
Yeah.
I'm just debunking that really quick because I hear that all the time and I'm like, no, there's actually no truth or data
No,
behind
I
that.
mean, if we're talking about misconceptions, yeah, I have a couple of them as well. Yeah. So basically, a lot of people think that only weirdos are kinky, right? So I mean,
Mm-hmm.
to me, the more I was exploring it, I think everyone has some sort of a kink profile. A lot of people will reject that fact, but to me, it's almost human nature to want something other than the traditional vanilla in the bedroom sex, right? To me, it
Yeah.
just feels natural for me. So yeah, exploring and accepting your personal kinks to me is crucial for your mental health as someone who is from the queer community. Becoming open and accepting and exploring those parts about yourself is crucial, because if you fail to overcome this stigma or this internalized stigma, it can lead to anxiety, depression, suicidality, I guess is the word you used the last time. So to
Yeah.
me, there it's kind of necessary for you to kind of think about it and look into it. So I did want to mention that, the misconception of only weirdos are kinky. Obviously, we just listed a bunch of kinks that most people engage in already.
Yeah.
And then another misconception is that every kinkster is into every kink, right? So some kinky people just like one or two ways of being kinky. Others collect kinks like they collect Pokemon, right? So if you're going into that realm, don't ever feel pressured to be an all-purpose kinkster, right? You
Yeah.
can just focus on one.
I love that you're mentioning that, because I think like a lot of people, when they hear like hey, Susie down the street is kinky, I think people's imagination goes to like the most perverse, out of this world,
She's
like
in
something
all
is
leather
wrong.
with the,
Oh my God.
whip,
Yeah.
right?
She's whipping people, and she's
Yeah.
got like, men on all fours in her house. Like they just imagine like
Yes,
the
yeah.
weirdest stuff.
Yeah.
Um, but you could be only into like nipple play, like maybe you really like your nipples played with and clamped or whatever. Like that one small thing, you're a kinky person. So I'm like, it's good that you're mentioning that, because I think people think of like the absolute extreme, and I'm like, no, actually, to be a kinky person, it's not really that serious,
Yeah.
really. Yeah, a lot of people are, and maybe don't want to admit that or haven't thought about it that way, but yeah. Yeah, it's really good to mention that.
Yeah, yeah. And then I also want to go into, yeah, what causes a kink as well, before I give you my list of how to explore it. But pretty much like you said, a lot of people think that it's some type of trauma. I did see, and this was an article in Vice. Basically, they listed a couple ways that you develop a kink, right? And it could be anywhere
Mhm.
from starting in childhood, like the example that was given was, let's say that you play, by your mother's feet all the time, you play your toys and stuff like that all by your mother's feet, so you just in the back of your brain start associating women's shoes with happy memories. And then maybe later
Mhm.
down the line you start seeing, maybe feet just to be a little bit more um uh, a happy place for you, right?
Yeah.
Or let's say you didn't receive attention as a child, you might like getting spanked because that's how you got attention as a child. So there are kinks that can develop in childhood, but it
Yeah.
also can develop later in life, right? So let's say your brain can pair uh, a non-sexual body part or situation or even an object to a certain sexy situation. So for instance, if you always masturbate on like a blue couch, later down the
Mhm.
line, seeing blue couches can, make you have a sense of, either arousal or maybe a sexy scenario of some sort, right? So these associations that happen in your brain can cause you to want to explore a kink of some sort. So I had to, since you mentioned it, I had to mention how I
Yeah,
that they get developed.
it's like the association in your brain, and it could be from childhood. And an example I use might be a weird one, but like Jello wrestling, like sexy
Oh,
women
okay. Yeah, sure.
like wrestling Jello. Um, like if someone were there for the first time watching Jello wrestling, and they find it to be very sexy, very arousing, even like the sound of Jello in the future can get them going. Like a sound
Interesting.
can like
Okay.
it's like the association. I'm not saying that
Because yeah, no,
I don't
you've associated it in your brain as
yeah,
this.
I
Yeah.
don't know. I've never met anyone who has had that experience, but for some odd reason, I always think about that. I'm like, yeah, if that was sexy, the sound of that event can be a sound that sticks with you as like an arousing sound or smell or whatever, right? So
Weird question. Have you ever done any type of jello wrestling, mud wrestling, soap wrestling, anything like that before as a femme, straight woman?
no, I
No.
never have.
Okay.
I've never even been to an event like that. I mean, I'm not against it, but I've never gone.
One of my first lesbian parties was actually they had it was soap. Yeah, it was soap wrestling. And a bunch of partners would get together and try to wrestle each other to the ground. And I will say it was not as sexy as they make it seem. It was fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, just getting all that out of the way, I do want to mention basically the ways that I found how to explore your kinks yourself,
Hmm.
with a partner, pretty much self-reflecting. So I would say, like I said before, the process is very crucial for self-discovery because it allows individuals to connect to your authentic self, you know, exactly what you want. Which if you, what is that saying? If you love yourself, if you can't love yourself, how the hell are you gonna love somebody else, right?
Mm,
So it, to me, if you're self-reflecting on what you like, it will foster a healthier relationship with other people because you'll have a healthy relationship with your body and your desires. So the first step, in my opinion, to how to explore your kinks is self-reflection. So, you know, you need to think about what your fantasies are and what constantly turns you on. And so this is where I'm going to mention Kinky Sam Jones' YouTube channel. She is a BDSM. You can tell she's a sub. But basically, if you check out her channel, and I will link it, she makes a spreadsheet for you that you can download, and it's for if you wanted to go into the dom sub kind of realm, right? And it lists different kinks, and it asks you to fill out your experience level, and how scary it is, and in my opinion, most importantly, does it turn you on from a scale that starts with your hard limits, as in the scale that you have to fill out on the spreadsheet is, you know, 0 would be I will not do this under any circumstance,
mm,
doesn't matter. And then 5 is obviously, you know, this is a wild turn on. So that's where I was introduced to the concept of soft nose and hard nose,
yeah.
right? So hard nose are absolutely, don't even ask. A soft no is I wouldn't like to do this, but if you ever, like in the dom sub play, if the dom ever wants to give the sub some type of punishment, then their ones are a good, you know, a punishment that they don't want to do it, but for the consensual role play that they have, you know, they will if they're asked by their master.
Mm.
So I will mention that because the list was very extensive, extremely extensive. So if there's something that you're willing to explore, you just want to learn the list of kinks that are even possible, I highly, highly recommend going to Kinky Sam Jones YouTube channel.
I'll also include I have this like kink navigation sheet from Sunny Megatron that is also very extensive. It's not quite like the one you're explaining, but similar to
Okay.
kind of like there's a whole bunch of kinky terms. A lot of them I don't even know. I have to like Google the definition to remind myself like what is that thing again? So it is very extensive. But it is a good way to navigate like where are the hard no's and the hard yeses and where's the in between, like the hard and soft no's and yeses. And what does that mean for you? And also like in Sunny Megatron's, there's also like an emotional section or like a list of emotions of what do you gain from what you like or what do you expect to gain or what kind of feeling do you want to experience, and it's like an emotional side of it as well, which I think is really important. So I'm gonna have to check out the one that you're talking about because I've never seen that, but that sounds so cool
No,
to be
and
able to kind of rank it.
that sounds awesome. So yeah, so that was my first piece of advice is just do that self-reflection, right? You know, the spreadsheet, the lists, those are things that way you kind of know what you're comfortable with and what you're not comfortable with. That's the big one, what you're not comfortable with. And then the second piece of advice I got is basically immerse yourself in the culture, which you mentioned a
Mm-hmm.
bunch. I
Mm-hmm.
also highly recommend you learn about consent because consent is huge. Also, there's erotic literature, which is
Mm-hmm.
really fun for anyone who likes to read or just likes a quiet time but wants to explore it. I've read some novels by Zane before in my past, in my 20s, and boy, were those some books that I could not put down. So definitely big fan of erotic literature. And then you mentioned Munch, but I'm also going to mention Fet Life. So
Yeah.
apparently there's this website. It's a free online community for pretty much the fetish community, the kink community. A bunch of, obviously there's the umbrella of kink, but they also have a bunch of little tiny subsets. If you're into a specific kink, that would be a really good online community and resource for you to look into. And then just piggybacking on learning about consent, you also need to, when you get more into the kink area, you need to learn about negotiation, which is pretty much communicating, right? So you need to start becoming comfortable in the concept of talking about your interests, which I feel is the hardest part, is learning how to talk and communicate what you like and what your fantasies are. You also start learning about like safe words and like the actual dialogue or agreed upon physical signals. It doesn't even have to be a word. It could literally just be a signal that you need just in case you have to pause or stop. So those are really good fundamentals that you need to learn about before you even try to go out and explore and meet a kinkster or take a class or go into a workshop or a discussion group. Obviously, you can learn these things at the classes, but I would say at least do a brief research beforehand. And then what I learned from my lesbian group, as far as meeting kinksters, is there's munches, there's the FetLife, but there's Facebook groups too. So I thank you, Lindsay, for making this a topic, because when I reached out to my lesbian group, they added me to a new lesbian group for, you know, pretty much it's like Let's Get Kinky. So it's basically a group of lesbians who are very much into kink. And so I found my people. It was great. Thank you.
I love it. Yeah, I love it. I love it. And you know, like real quick, speaking of FetLife, which is a great resource. Like I think definitely use all of your online resources and even YouTube channels, right? Like if you're new to kink, but you don't even really know where to start, there are a lot of great creators out there who can guide you, right? Like you can do it, you can watch it on your phone, on your computer at home, right? Without even having to go anywhere. But with FetLife, so, and not even just specifically FetLife, like any kind of online community where you're meeting other people, you just always have to be cautious. If someone is making you feel uncomfortable on there, you don't have to keep talking to them.
Yeah.
Midori actually had a really great post. This might have been like a year ago. I probably won't be able to find the post, but she had a post, and I don't know if it was on FetLife or not, but it was on some like communication site, and someone was wanting to really like explore bondage with her because she's an expert in that area, but they were very aggressive about it, and she was just kind of like, her message was kind of like, you don't even know me. Like,
Yeah.
you know who I am, maybe because I've written books and like I'm well known in like the sex educator community, but you don't like personally know me, and you're already wanting to do all this stuff with me, and I could easily take advantage of you if I wanted to, because it's kind of like careless to be that aggressive, to be like, let's meet up, let's do these, let's go ahead and agree. And so her advice is always like, you got to slow way down. You got to make sure this is someone that you can trust. You got to get to know them as a person, at least on some level, right? Like, I trust you. I feel good about this. We've met in person. We talked. We have negotiated. You know where my heart boundary. Like, she slows it down. She's like, go have all your fun, but not with someone that you like. You don't even know these people
Yeah.
online,
No,
right?
no, for real, for real.
Yeah.
I have pretty much some caution tips for my newbies. So basically, going back to the safe word. So just for anyone who doesn't know, a safe word allows you to explore, and it allows you to actually push boundaries freely with your partner, because if your safe word is different from no or stop, you know, you can, a lot of people have a fantasy and they like to say the words no and stop, and they like their partners to keep pushing that, right? Pushing that limit. So with a safe word that's not, you know, a stop or a no, then you're able to explore telling someone to stop and then pushing your limits freely without your partner crossing a line, right? Because they know that there is a hard stop available in this predetermined word or symbol that you guys have agreed upon. So safe word is definitely something that's used, especially with newbies. Another thing for newbies that I was told is basically never pretend that you aren't new. If you're new, say you're new. You also want to take precautions when meeting someone in person for the first time, right? It's very similar to like a Tinder date. You don't you don't just immediately bring them over to your house and your address and everything like that. You have to take certain precautions.
Yeah.
And then another thing, which leads me into the misconceptions again, is that there are creeps and controllers
Well, and it's
in the
just
BDSM
like,
community.
and it's just like you just said, there's creeps, there's people who are out there they're being predatory. It's the exact same if you're just trying to date. Kind of
Yeah,
like you said, like I think people think like people in the kink community, kiki people, oh, they're just careless, they do whatever they want. No, they don't. It's the exact same concept as when you're like just trying to date, you're on a dating website. I'm not going to, with a man I've talked to for 5 minutes, agree to go to his house and let him do whatever he wants to me. I mean, right, you're going to take your precautions like, I want to meet you in a public area and let's go out to dinner and let's talk and let's, right, like you're going to at least do that. Like, even if it leads to a one night stand, you at least get some kind of like comfort level of, okay, person is, I don't think they're out trying to get me, right? It's the
yeah.
same in the kink community. So it's so good that you're mentioning that, because I really think people think like kinky people is the same as being careless, and it absolutely is not at
No,
all.
there are rules and regulations. And
Yeah.
while the vast majority of kinksters are wonderful people, I
Mm-hmm.
haven't met a kinkster yet that wasn't just amazing in and out, like completely in
Yeah.
and out. But unfortunately, the scene does have a few awful characters that will take advantage of newcomers. They might be a little bit creepy, which is, easy to avoid, but some will try to use their supposed superior kink knowledge or experience as a way to control newcomers in an unhealthy
Mm-hmm.
way, right? And the worst cases in the community, this does happen, is there can be rapes. There can be people taken advantage of. Like, this can happen. It's not a community where this doesn't happen.
Right.
So I do want to not caution people, because like I said, the vast majority of kinksters are amazing people, but do treat it like you're dating. Be
Mm-hmm.
have your protection set in place. So yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there as well. And with that being said, I'm also going to mention, as far as expectations, have kind of an open mind as far as your expectations, right? Because kink community, there's media that shows, it's hot, it's amazing, it's sexual, it's sensual, it's very arousal. But if you go into it with like these really high expectations, I don't want you to expect your fantasy to match the actual reality of the
Yeah.
situation, right? So I would say, I would just advise, don't expect your reality to match your masturbation fantasies. While a good kink experience can be mind-blowing, which it can, not every experience will be, and that's fine. It's not fine. It doesn't have to match what you see in the media or what you see in your imagination. It's good to explore, but just be prepared that there are some things that you will explore that you think are going to be really hot in real life, but might not.
Well, and it also doesn't mean like if it doesn't go the way that you wanted it to go. Like let's say you're trying out a fantasy role play with someone who is new and maybe a little bit nervous. It's not going to be the same if you're trying it with someone who's done that 100 times, right? Like it's going to be a different experience.
Yeah.
If you can just let it be good, I always call it good enough. Like,
Mm.
hey, it was good enough. No one got hurt. We communicated well. It was kind of fun, but maybe they were, like it's good enough. If you let it be, maybe you can try it again the next time, right? Maybe it'll be a
Hey.
little bit like you can kind of like build up to it. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Don't get discouraged so easily. Like, hey, this was supposed to be a mind-blowing experience. Well, it wasn't, but
Yeah.
maybe it can be the next time. Like just get back up and try it again, right? If you really want to, and let it be okay. And
Yeah.
it's the same. And again, it's the same with even like non-kinky sex, like in your relationship, like in any I'll use my marriage, like let's say you're married and you're monogamous. Sex every time isn't going to be mind blowing. And if you have that expectation, you're kind of setting yourself up to be disappointed. Like you're going to have times where sex is just okay. And then you're going to have times where it is really, really great. Because
Yeah.
that's
No.
just such as life, right?
Life. Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah. Open your expectations. And with that being said, also, just to throw this out there, kink doesn't always involve sex either. It doesn't have to
Yeah.
involve intercourse. You can be kinky over the phone. You can be
Mm-hmm.
kinky through a webcam. You don't have to touch someone to
Mm-hmm.
explore a kink, right? You don't even have to have an orgasm. Like that's not
Right, right.
requirement of exploring this kink. So definitely go out there, guys, read some books, listen to some podcasts. I'm going to mention this to you, Lindsay, as something part of this research that I'm happy you made me do, and I made my wife do this as well. Did you know that there is a BDSM test?
Yeah.
I
Uh-huh.
took it.
Oh, you did? What were the I think I probably took it like maybe a long time ago. I would need to redo it.
I say
But
we do it on, like, it doesn't even have to be part of the
okay.
podcast. Let's do it on film. Let's have you take it. We
Okay.
can take it together and then we can see our
Yeah.
results and kind of prepare them if you're
Okay.
comfortable with that.
Yeah, no, I'm totally
Um,
comfortable with that. Yeah.
yeah, it
Yeah.
was really fun. I took it. I got my list of uh kinks that were tied to me. It wasn't that surprising, but there were a couple things on there that I was like, oh, that's why I'm that way, right? And then we had Sam take it, and her kinks were almost polar opposite, but very complementary
Oh,
to
that's
mine, right? So
funny.
yeah, there was
I love it.
the two that made me, that kind of liberated me, because like I said, there's having you as a friend, and in the mental health space, I've learned a lot about consent, and I've learned about how that can that is very, very important, and it's a very important thing. But there is such thing that I discovered about myself recently, which is a brat. A brat is part of the kink
Mm.
community, and it's basically someone that you kind of have to coax in and coerce into certain sexual behaviors, and they give you some pushback, and they give you they say no a lot, right? So when we were first starting this podcast, I was very much struggling with that, because my partner constantly, she says no 85% of the time, and I have to coerce her into
Mhm.
doing it. And that's always been our sexual play. But starting this podcast, I was like, there's something wrong with that, it's not okay. But then taking the
Yeah.
BDSM
Yeah.
test, it was light bulb where, okay, she's just a brat, and then my role in that relationship is I'm a brat tamer, which is a term I've never heard of before, but it pretty much liberated me in my thinking as, my behavior being problematic. It's
Well,
obviously
that's
consent is still
that's
required, but
but y'all do have consent, right? I
yes,
mean, that's the
yes,
thing is that that's y'all's dynamic, but it is still consensual. It's
yeah,
not the same as a non-consensual like situation, you know? So I'm glad that that makes me happy to hear. You
yeah.
got like the language to it of like, ah, okay. So it's
Good.
okay. We're okay.
Yes, yeah, because I learned in the first episode, I learned about enthusiastic consent, right? That's what you should always have, enthusiastic consent. She should outwardly say yes. But then learning about the kink community, I'm like, oh no, as long as we're both okay with it, it doesn't
Yeah,
have to look
yeah.
that way. So it was
Mm-mm.
really good, and I'm really happy for it. So yeah, we will be taking that test together, just so you're
Okay.
aware.
Perfect. I'm up for it.
Yeah, but that's all I have. So if you have any other tips, tricks, advice, please.
I don't think so. I think we covered a lot of ground here. So
Okay.
I love this topic.
Me,
And yeah, for anyone listening, please comment. Let us know what you thought. Like, did you learn something new? Was there something you wish we would have covered? Because again, this is such a big topic. Like, there's so many like subtopics in this topic that
yeah.
for future episodes we could probably cover a lot more stuff. So let us
No,
know what you
I
think.
definitely want to ask the audience, please, guys, if you can, I would love to foster a really good open community with this podcast. So in the comments, I want you to leave basically, how did you explore your kinks? Because maybe there's something we mentioned or we didn't mention that would be really good for, the commenters to, the people who are looking in the comments to explore. And I also want to know my second question, any resources that you have, any books, any podcasts. Don't put any links in my comments, please, because that might be scamming. But definitely put, the name of the book, the author, the YouTuber, the whoever it is. Just
Mhm.
leave a beautiful forum of resources for our community, so that way we can all explore together and have a nice little list.
Yep, I love it. Please do that. Yeah, like, subscribe, comment, let us know what you think.
And then just, I'm going to plug in our Instagram for these episodes should be coming out a little bit before Valentine's Day. In the Instagram that we have, you can probably find us by just searching Sex Positivity Unfiltered. I have started, and I'm not doing it every day, but I'm doing a couple a week. I've started giving you guys conversation starters for, you know, to talk with about your partner, maybe to explore yourself. So these are for you. So definitely go and check that out and tag your partner if you want and start talking.
Yeah, absolutely. Check those out, guys. Have those conversations with your partners. And stay tuned for the next episode, which we'll have in a couple of weeks. Thanks for tuning in and listening. We are Sex Positivity Unfiltered. And remember to stay curious and fuck politeness.